A very good afternoon to all of you. I'm Ankita from NASSCOM. I'm back with the 11th episode from our product management series. And today I have with me SS Malthi, Head of Product Management at Societe Generale. She will share her perspective on building fintech products. Two more things from my side. Please ask questions anytime during the session, which Malti will cater to after the presentation. Please do not forget to leave the feedback after the session to make my future webinars, helpful and beneficial to all of you. Over to you, Malti.
All right. Thank you, Ankita. A very good afternoon, everybody. My name is Malti, as Ankita already said, and I'm quite excited to be sharing my perspective on building fintech products in today's session. This is more of a disclaimer that these views are only my personal views, which is based on my own journey and not really what NASSCOM or Societe Generale's strategy or thought processes. Okay, with this, I will just quickly go over to a little bit about myself, and then we will deep dive into the specifics of today's session. So overall, I have about 19 years of industry experience, and of that, the first 8 to 10 years was purely into developing products, was purely into doing solution designing, coding, and doing project management. And then 2010 is when I moved from doing project management onto doing product management. And happy to say that I was a accidental product manager because 10 years back, this was not really a profile which was so very well known, at least in the Indian subcontinent. And then over my journey, I have kind of unraveled and figured out my own style of product management, and of course, have been very instrumental by driven by my mentors. Okay, over the last 19 years, the primary application or the area that I have worked on is SAP. Various modules in SAP, including FICO, which gives me some draws on the domain itself. When I started my product management career, which was back in 2010 with SAP, one of the first products that I worked on was an enterprise product called Test Data Migration Server, which was end-to-end, roll-into roll-out, which I managed that product for about 4 years. And then I moved on to join EMC for a short time, and where I managed this product called as XCP, which is basically a case management tool. From there, after about a year, I moved on to join Intuit, which is primarily into financial products like the financial accounting, which is QuickBooks, and TurboTax in the tax space, and of course, personal finance Mint. So during these, different organizations is when I kind of had my own journey and experience of working with enterprise customers, small and medium businesses through QuickBooks and TurboTax, where I was, of course, managing the consumer space, pure consumer space. And I also spent a little bit time on Mint on the personal finance side of it. And for the last 1 year, I work with Societe Generale, which is a leading European financial services group. And, we kind of deal with a lot of different financial services, offerings, products. And here, I had the product management space for the KYC, and my team kind of co-constructs products across with other various IT teams. What are some of the other things that I do apart from my day job as a product management leader is that I have been a constant product management community evangelist starting from my day at SAP, and also I ran this community for some time at Intuit, and this is something also that I'm trying to set up at Societe Generale. I am also an woman in tech evangelist and have been an active speaker at GHCI and a lot of SAP sessions, and at Women in Tech. So that is something that I've co-founded in GSC, which is SocGen, as part of the diversity and inclusion group. And this year, also for Grace Hopper, I am one of the reviewers for the design and product track. So that was not really a small, but a detailed, profile about myself. So as you can see that I have kind of worked on a lot of different, I'm passionate about a lot of different things, and I have worked on a diverse set of products. So I'm just trying to sum up what I see, how I see this entire space today in the next 35 to 40 minutes. Okay, when we talk about fintech products, I would say it's really a wide spectrum. I'm sure the number of people who are there in this session today, everybody has their own scope, everybody has their own vision of what would be a fintech product for me, which is definitely just bringing the finance and the technology together. I think the technology has been a very instrumental driving factor, constantly revolutionizing the financial industry, and it is just getting more aggravated. It is just accelerating the revolution that we are talking about. And when I again kind of go back to what I was saying earlier, when I think of fintech products, to me, what the picture that comes into our mind is the four blind people, looking at an elephant, and everybody has their own definition on the scope that they say they can see, on what they can touch and feel. That kind of talks about the broad category of products that we are talking about here. Now, there are different ways that we can dissect of how what are the different players, or what are the different categories of products that we talk about in fintech. But probably for this conversation today, I will broadly divide it into four parts. You have the incumbent players, where basically you have the banks, the traditional banks, and we have to say that though these banks are so big, they are one of the primary reasons of bringing off these digital transformation, purely because of the reach they have, the depth they have, the manpower that they have, that they are able to lead these transformation. Of course, they directly deal with enterprises, they deal with consumers, and of course, in the last era, in the last decade, with smartphones coming in, they have gone up the digital transformation by leaps and bounds in terms of online banking, doing everything online without leaving your home. And when I talk about international trades, for example, or transactions, the amount of automation, the amount of smartness that we have gone over there, it's really amazing. So that is the first sector that I want to talk about. The second sector that I want to talk about is the enterprise and the SMBs. Of course, we have huge companies like SAPs and the Oracle financials. We have Salesforce, who have the financial products in the area of financial accounting, invoicing, managing payroll. And then, of course, there are small other players like QuickBooks. You have H&R Block, who are taking care of the SMB business. So that's another segment. The third segment that I want to talk about, which is probably is what has evolved in the last 10 years since the major technology boom that we have seen with AI, ML, and data sciences and all that, is a lot of non-financial services companies. Let's say you talk about retailers, you talk about technology platforms, automakers, you talk about Apple, a Google, or an Amazon, with them segueing into some or the other financial offerings, right? And they are basically able to leverage on their existing customer base to be able to make these offerings and kind of leverage on that. And then, of course, the fourth segment is what we have, the new players. It's the new kid on the block, which is basically the smaller startups who are able to identify those white spaces where nobody else has probably ventured into. They are able to marry the technology edge that they have to say that how I can be more disruptive, and how I can just change the entire game plan. How do I do things completely in a different way? So these are like the four wider group that I have. So why am I talking about this today is that just to give you what is the wide spectrum that we have, and all of us to kind of look at it a little holistically, the way that I'm looking at these things. And while we talk about a lot of these good things, there is definitely a downside to have it. With all the technology boom, suddenly I have become very vulnerable because my data is out there. While I talk about financial inclusion, there is a segment which is also financially excluded, who are there excluded from this community, people who don't use smartphones, countries where the internet connection is extremely slow, where cash is still very important part of the economy. So how are we addressing those things? The banks are becoming more vulnerable because they started to use cloud. How much data do I share? There is a change in the regulation. So we will kind of try to touch and feel each of these things, that as a product manager, if I am going to develop a fintech product in any of these four categories that I talked about, what are the things that I need to be sensitive? There is a whole bunch of things that you need to be aware of. But yes, of course, we can't do everything in a short time. So I will touch upon some of the key things that I see are important. This is just more as a reference, what you see here, which I wanted to bring in, that what is the change in the overall a landscape that we see on the fintech products. So if you look at it, this is a data, the survey that ENY basically got in February 2019. If I compare this, what you see on the left side, the global consumer adoption, which is 64% now, which is largely driven by your adoption of smartphones and online activities. This was less than 30% in 2017. And you can see the amount of adoption that we have seen over here. Couple of other things which I definitely want to talk about is that you can see, again, money transfer and payments are the kind of leading use cases that we have in this space. I mean, overall, in the last 4 to 5 years that I use a lot of fintech app, I can see the number of digital wallets that have gone amazingly up. The number of players who are coming in, who are offering these payment, money transfer and payment platform, again, is huge. So we have seen a flurry of apps coming out there. The other aspect, interesting aspect, is that the 68% of consumer would consider non-financial services company for a financial services. So that is also, again, as I talked about, is a mind shift, wherein I am okay to use an Amazon Pay to pay. I'm okay to use a Apple Pay or Google Pay to pay, even though they have nothing to do with finance. Do I trust Google more than Citibank? Maybe, because I have been using Google for so many things. I read about that they are so secure. So it's again, the trust factor, which is kind of slowly gaining up. And the other aspect which I want to kind of highlight here is that the consumers are also willing to share their data. I am okay to share this data if you can give me a good offer. So we will kind of also, touch upon some of these things. And the most important thing not to forget is that a lot of these new kids on the block, especially the fintech services, are also able to thrive because they are able to come up with some attractive rates and fees. And to somehow that is also driven by the fact that the data is shared. The amount of the cost incurred probably to save this data, to do the entire infrastructure, has come down with a lot of technology advancements that we have. This is just a reflection of, that if you can see, there are two categories. First of all, on the left side is all these different types of offerings that we can have in the fintech space. As you saw in the primary one, the biggest category, I think, is right now the adoption is in the area of money transfer and payments. What would be other interesting thing is that while there has been disruption in the way the traditional banking was done, which is basically the darker gray. So there is stock broking has moved from, let's say, offline to online. Foreign exchange has moved from offline to online. But there are new things like a peer-to-peer payment. I would never think of lending money to somebody I don't even know. But then today there are platforms which offer me, I know the profile of this person, and I can guarantee you probably 90% chances of him not defaulting. And I, for some reason, start to trust. So these are some of the things we talk about, that how do you induce that trust factor in your customers if you are a newbie into the space, right? So these are just some of the trends that I wanted to highlight. Again, with a lot of people becoming, entrepreneurship coming into picture, there is a spike that we have seen in the last 5 to 7 years, that a lot of people are trying to do their own businesses. So definitely small and medium businesses is something that we definitely cannot ignore. And in the last years, you would have seen a lot of products which are coming out in the market, which I'm not only talking about fintech, but even outside fintech, who are actually focusing only on how to address this market, right? Whether it is to address a Uber driver, whether it is to address a, let's say, a guy who runs Airbnb. So you can see a whole lot of online offerings for this particular segment. All right. Coming to the next one is, of course, the banks. I just wanted to kind of, this is again a report which I kind of picked up from McKinsey, where they are just saying that just see the number of channels that a bank needs to be aware of. The people are reaching through mobile, digital assistant. You have an Alexa saying that, hey, can you let me know what is the interest rates today X bank is offering on? social media, it is very important to be out there and to create the awareness. Third parties, of course, we have platforms, we have banking platforms, you have Bank Bazaar and so many of them who are basically helping you to um, reach to a much wider audience, to a bigger adoption. So, and then on the right side, you see that what are those different technology aspects that a PM needs to be aware of, which are definitely having a significant impact. And this is not only for a bank, this is not only when they are touch points with their customers, but even internally. The banks are, or for that matter, any organization which has been building these financial products are sitting on a huge amount of customer data. So what do I do with that? How do I know what could be the next big product that I need to take to the market? How do I know that what are my customers really looking at? So it is really important for me to, number one, mine that data. And eventually I see that these channels and these technologies to come for a unified customer journey, right? If I have a customer who I know that has a good bank balance, I should give him offers for doing investments. How do I kind of bring it all together for a customer for a delightful journey? So yeah, that was a long context, I know, before I kind of jump into each of the skill set that I kind of talk about that a FinTech PM needs to be aware of. So I'm sure that many of you would have seen this thing from Dan Schulman, where he talked about that we are in a very, very exciting time where we are seeing amazing amount of transformation almost on a daily basis. You kind of go into a technology news and you say, today this is something new, today this is something new. So we are at exciting times. So let's say how we can kind of ride into this and make it even more better. Alrighty, so talking about this whole gamut of changes which are going around us, what is that I as a PM need to constantly upskill myself? What is that? What are the things that I need to watch out for? What are the things that I need to learn and probably even unlearn? What are the things that I need to watch out for? So of course, I mean, as with any product management, or for that matter, any product that you build, there are those core PM skills that remain as is. But then again, depending upon the industry, depending upon the market segment, depending upon the domain in which you are working, depending upon the ecosystem that you thrive in, there is always some core skill sets, some additional skill sets that a PM needs to become like a full stack PM. The way you have a full stack developer, a PM also is kind of in the center of a lot of things, and they need to imbibe on a lot of skill sets. Okay, so I will get into some of these skill sets that I have kind of quoted here. All right, so the first one I would say is know your business like nobody else does. As we just saw, the fintech industry is really, really wide. So you need to know that what is that use case, what is that one problem that I want to solve around. Let's say if I'm talking about payments, if I'm talking about a loan, you need to know the end-to-end cycle of what does that mean. You need to know the market, you need to know your customer, you need to know your target segment, and all the environmental things that are critical to make your product a success. Now, how do I make that happen? Definitely, you can't do it all by yourself. You need to have a bunch of people who know the market. So I would say the first thing would be whenever whether in an existing organization, whether you're trying to do a new product or you're trying to build your own company, as a product manager, I would say is that have the people who know about that particular space around you. Lean on to them, learn from them, build your domain knowledge, ask questions, ask a lot of questions. That if I have to start, let's say, a peer-to-peer lending, what are the things, as a what are the kind of, let's say, uh, approvals that I need to have? How do I figure out whether the people I'm onboarding, are they the right people or not? Will they default? What are the checks that I need to do? If I have to offer, what could be the right rates that I need to offer? How do I price it? How do I determine the risk of a borrower? So there are like different things that you need to ask, and you have to also be wary of one part. Finance industry is slower due to a lot of regulations. So before you kind of get that brilliant idea of yours out, it is going to take some time. There are a bunch of approvals you would need. There are a bunch of screenings that you would need to do. You need to make sure that you have all aspects covered. What does that mean also is that you have probably a bunch of more stakeholders to add to your complex world than probably what a normal product manager would have. Already a product manager is more like a captain of the ship who's trying to bring everybody along to make sure that the ship sails. And in this particular case, when you're talking about a fintech space, you have the risk guys, you have of course the legal guys on your side, you have the operations guys on your side, you have the compliance guys on your side. So there are probably 4 or 5 pillars more with whom you need to work very closely. Yeah, you need to probably work with compliance team which works in turn with the government agencies. So so make sure that you ask the right kind of questions. Make sure that you understand the business properly. And the way to do it, as I said, just ask questions. Know your customers. We need to do what we do by building our customer empathy. Use all the tools that you need to have, whether it is drawing your customer journey, doing follow me homes, observing your customers, listening to your customers. And again, I want to emphasize that fintech is all about money. So people really care about their money. So you better get your homework done very properly. Otherwise, the product will not be successful. Okay, so that was a lot of knowing your business. Now, once you have done that, the next thing you talk about is that, okay, I know what exactly I need to do. Now, how do I make the onboarding of my customers to my platform, to my product easy? Or if I'm introducing a new feature, how do I make it very clear to the customer? Or if there is a new rules, I think all of us have been reeling under GDPR, the data loss for the last couple of years. Like Facebook has been hit by it. There have been so much of data breaching that has been happening. So we really need to get things right. So these tough messages, how do I speak human? How do I make sure that my customer is able to understand? So definitely financial tools aren't the most exciting product to use. How many of us feel very glad to do taxes? I'm sure it's like, okay, I just want to kind of get done with that, right? And so so when you are developing your financial products, make sure that to the T, you follow all the best practices in terms of doing your usability testing, observing your user, doing dry tests, doing especially if you're launching something new, make sure that you are capturing from the user that what is that most one important thing that would make a difference to the user. I can probably talk about TurboTax. We know that when a user, especially in the US, the customers get a lot of money back as part of their taxes. So we knew that when a customer is filing his taxes, the most important thing that he would look forward to is that, what is my refund, right? So that is what, as soon as the customer comes into the product, the first big thing that the customer sees is that if he's already kind of put in some data, that how much refund can he or she expect. So identify that what is that resonates with the customers and how you can clearly show it. In the financial products, we are talking all about numbers, but please do not overwhelm your customers with numbers. If the customer is doing is a transaction, have it very clearly laid out. What are the charges? What are the hidden charges? I mean, try not to have any hidden charges. Clearly label them. What are the charges for? Upfront tell the customers that if there is an additional charges that you are levying for something. If there is a lot of numbers, look at how you can better represent it in the form of a chart or a graphics. Have, I don't have to needless to say, appropriate background, font, all those aspects. And I think one of the other important things I would talk about is that be very clear in terms of messaging. So for example, KYC is mandatory in whenever you kind of start using a app, right? Whether it is a Paytm. So KYC in itself requires the customers to fill in a lot of data. So for example, I know for Paytm, they introduced something in eKYC. They said, okay, for 1 year, I'm not going to ask you to go to a center and do it over there. For 1 year, I give you the provisioning. You just enter this much of data. So by the time I'm doing it, there is a lot of data which is auto-populated. It is giving me exactly why it is asking me for some information. It is asking me where that data is going to be stored. So be very clear that why are you asking for some data and how is it going to be stored? Because ultimately it is about money and it is about trust. Care about app security. I mean, while you are building your apps, give due importance to your the security aspect, especially when you are doing a peer-to-peer transfer from banks, from users. So be very clear. Don't overwhelm them with captchas and authentications. So be cognizant about it, that how far do you want to take them in terms of putting it up. So I can probably talk about one example while I was working with one of my apps. So the requirement was that competitor product was kind of hacked, and there were some data breaches that happened. So we said, oh, okay, we now need to introduce OAuth 2, that is the new authentication model. Plus, we also want to introduce CAPTCHA. And imagine, so far the customer doesn't even have to do anything except putting his password. Now, suddenly after the password, I say, okay, now you have done the password, please put one additional PIN. After you have put the PIN, please do the CAPTCHA. We said CAPTCHA will probably be shown to not more than 7% of the people. But that means there is still a 7% of my customer segment who has to go through these 3 barricades before they can actually do their transaction. I would assume a huge drop ratio over there. And as a product manager, I need to care about my users. We did do some user studies, and our hypothesis was right, where the customers, by the time they come to the 3rd page, especially if they're shown the CAPTCHA, they were frustrated. They were like, I don't want to use this. I will probably go and use another product. So please fight for your customers. Know where to draw the line. While security is very, very important, but you need to have that fine balance between the user experience and the security aspects, right? And the other thing, key thing in this area would be that, especially when you are launching new products, be very clear with your documentation. Either your user experience is so fantastic that the user doesn't need to look at anything, and it is very, very intuitive to go to the next steps. But at the same time, you have all kinds of users coming in. So please make sure that the documentation is very easily accessible. It is interactive. The user doesn't have to switch too many screens to do all this. So it is very important to have access to learning material, and keep monitoring your data. Where do you see the dropout ratio? What is that I can do to make this experience a little bit better? So that is kind of important to build the trust, number one. Number two, to be very clear to the users to say that how is their transaction gone? Is it successful? Is it not successful? So please be very clear. The next one, I would say, again, I think more from the healthcare products and for the finance products, this is really, really important, that be responsible. I'm assuming that every month that the salary that I get, the taxes have been exactly properly calculated. There are no errors, and I don't want to pay some extra money as taxes to the government, right? So that means that this payroll application, which is used by my organization, is doing its job properly. That means after this year's finance budget has come in, all the tax slabs, all the calculations, all the exemptions, all have been factored in properly so that I am getting what I am supposed to get. So that's what I mean, be responsible. Because if you are not, this could be big. This can cause big repercussions, right? Especially areas where you are doing expense management, payroll, tax calculation, for that matter, I would say anywhere. So what does it mean for a PM? What it means for a PM is that please get into the details. In the past, when I have, handled, I mean, I'm sure many of you, if you would be handling products on loans, payroll, expense management. So typically, our organizations would have an army of people who are there in the finance operations, who are there in the compliance team, who are kind of in touch with the regulatory agencies to understand, okay, now there is a new set of rules, let's say a new set of rules for AML, a new set of rules for KYC, a new finance budget has come in. So these government agencies will basically give them a list of requirements. Now that has to be interpreted by the compliance team and the operations team. So they would do an interpretation of the policies and the procedures, and then they would hand it over to the product manager and say, okay, please include these checks, these rules, these conditions into your product. That is why it is very, very important for a product manager to have a complete understanding, especially if you're expecting some big changes. Not that smaller changes doesn't matter, but please be on top of all these regulatory requirements understanding to make sure that your engineering team understands it. Please make sure that there is a good amount of testing. I rather, as a product manager, I would myself do as much testing as I can, because there is nothing like checking, using your product on your own and checking for accuracies. Of course, you have people out there to make sure that the calculations are correct, the errors are well taken care of. And at the same time, the other aspect I would want to say is that any of these changes which are coming from the compliance team, if it has an impact on your UI, if I have to say, let's say, because of this, you need to collect some additional data from the customer. That means customer has to type more, or you need some additional information from the customer. So please tone your messages in a very positive way. And as I said in my last slide, please make it very clear that why are you collecting that data? And please design your UIs and make sure that you are talking both to the customer as well as to the regulatory, so that the end-to-end chain is taken care of, right? I mean, if you do not have stringent AML checks, fraud checks on a, let's say, on a money transfer, the penalties are really high. So we really need to be responsible and watch out that we do not have any errors. We have strong guardrails around our products. That kind of, automatically gets into, okay, I know what are the compliance checks, I have put in all that, but does that mean that my product is secure? No. So this is another aspect, that how much technical a product manager should be. I would say be technology savvy, because I think in IT products that we are building today, there are hardly any products which are not touched by the cutting edge technologies that we have. So please be aware, be informed, but yes, lean on the expert in your architecture, the experts, the architects for the recommendations. Watch out the technology trends, the what has been proven, do POCs. And if there is a trade-off that you need to do between your security requirements versus your features, there has to be a balance, again, as I talked about in the previous example. But if needed, please make sure that you give preference to your security measures, right? Whether it is talking about authorizations, captchas, whether it is talking about identification, this is really, really important. So, I mean, you definitely need to have these regulatory check from the agencies, because a lot of times also these agencies recommend that, okay, this is the level, this is what exactly you need to talk about. Now we have new directives. I don't know how many of you know about it. We have something called as the Second Payment Services Directive, which is PSD2. We are talking about open banking, where we are saying, okay, I want the banks to open up their data, customers' data, for a to the third parties, so that we are not asking the customer for the same data again and again, and we need to figure out what is that we can do. Of course, this has to be done with the customer's acceptance. I mean, the customer has to give the consent. So imagine the amount of impact this kind of a regulatory change is having. First of all, you need to have a way where you kind of convince your customers that, okay, I want to share your data outside. Are you okay with that? Now, the question the customer will ask is that, what is that I get out of it? Of course, we can think of complementary offers, products, services that we can offer to our customers by partnering with some third-party companies or third-party products. But that means that to implement this PSD2 and to implement this open banking, there has to be a complete strategic thinking that needs to be done. I, as a product manager, need to make sure that I am thinking through what does it mean for my infrastructure? What does it mean for my existing product? What does it mean for my security? How do I beef it up? What does it mean for me to for my data? What is the format I'm going to push it into the platform, right? So when you talk about open banking, customers will have more control of their data. They will decide, okay, how do I want to do? Probably you guys can think of, sharing smart contracts on a blockchain platform. So I don't know how many of you know, but there are a lot of different banks who are coming together to form consortiums, and they are saying that same customer has multiple relationships with many of us. Instead of going and asking the customer the same data again and again, I am ready to share some of my customers' data with his or her concerned to be available to others. So I am already validating, I have done their KYC. Please go ahead and take it. If you want to take it, of course, you need to pay me something. So there has to be some incentive that needs to be done. So if I have to build such a platform, what all are the different things that I kind of talk about, right? Cyber security, data privacy. So, and let's say if I'm talking about testing my product, um, while I'm building these new scalable platforms, what is the kind of testing that I need to do? Obviously, I can't start doing it with the production data. That means I need to get an anonymized form of my production data into my quality servers to be able to do some effective testing. So as a product manager, I would say, think really broad, bring in the experts, and these are some of the very strategic initiatives where you definitely have a very, very critical role to play as a product manager, and also to kind of think forward, right, and paint that vision. So for a bank or for an organization, they are just saying, oh, PSD2 is out, that means open banking. Everybody is looking at a product manager. Okay, what does that mean? What do we do with our products? How do we open up the data? How do we instill the confidence in the customers to say that their data is safe? So think through all these things. The next one that I want to talk about is partnerships, and probably this is again one of the very critical things. I probably want to talk about one of the products that I have worked on. Think of a personal finance app. Maybe in India, what many of you would have heard about is Wallet. Now, I want to have all my finance data in one place. I want to have my insurance data. I want to have my PF data, my PPF data, all the bank accounts that I have, all my mutual funds. Now, if Wallet has to talk to these many different organizations, they definitely need to have some kind of API or some kind of a communication. So if you are the product manager of Wallet, how would you go about doing it? Should I go to insurance first? I mean, all these integrations takes time, and not probably everybody has a open API or an API which is suiting to your requirements. So how go about finding it? And in India, think the best one is the India Stack, the UPI. They have made KYC so much more easier, right? That, I mean, Bheem and everybody is on that platform to say that, okay, I just need to partner with UPI and KYC is done. I just need to use the UPI to do the API integration with any of the banks. So suddenly all this has become so easy. But I, as a product manager, need to be to see what is the kind of revenue stream for me. Why would I do any kind of partnerships? Coming back to one of the first slides that I was talking about, there are multiple categories that we are talking about. So I am a small fintech. How do I make myself, reach out to a wider customer audience? This is where probably you kind of partner with, let's say, a bigger bank. And they have a huge customer base, and probably they do not have certain capabilities which you offer, right? So that is where you kind of start to say, okay, this is the benefit. You can use my products to first do it in your own organizations, and then probably I get access to your customer footprint. So there are those kind of strategic partnerships that that needs to start coming along. And that is where the opportunity for a product manager lies, where you kind of start to identify those white spaces. What kind of partnerships, whether it is an API integration, whether it is a strategic integration, if you are, let's say, tying up with another digital wallet, then what is the kind of strategic alignment that you have? What is the value proposition that you are bringing to the table, and what is that your partners are bringing to the table? So think of another use case. In Africa, the the cash is like it's very, very widely used. It's very much like India, where cash is very common. And then they figured out that uh, the banks are kind of really located far. The ATMs are not nearby, and that is where you have some of the apps over there. Where they are able to take the cash to the customers really closely through the local shopkeepers. So there are apps which have tied up, bringing together these different problems. So that's a problem that they have solved. This is disruptive. So try to identify that what could be those partnership which could be disruptive, which are white spaces nobody has solved, or which could be just be a new revenue stream for me, um, and how I can build on that. Okay, and probably this is like my last slide. So pretty much everything I spoke about, as a PM for a fintech product, ultimately, initially I can do virality, I can do a lot of offers to get my customers on board to my platform. But what is that stickiness that would leave my customers stick to my platform, be loyal, be my multiplier uh, for bringing in more customers? It is just the trust. So everything that we saw in the previous slides are actually laddering up to this. What you need to see is that while you make your product secure, while you secure the customer data, while you make it really simple, what is that value that you are bringing? What is the value added services that you're bringing to the customer? So whether it is, I am again kind of going back to the example of a personal finance. I have the entire customer's financial situation in front of me. Can I not partner with, let's say, a car loan or student loan? For example, if my customer is somebody, a millennial, a 21-year-old, started his first job, has so much money, can I look at a student loan that can be offered for his future education? Somebody who's 27 years old, and can I offer him a home loan? Can I offer him a car loan? So how do I offer these value to the services, value added services to the customers based on the data that I get? And that kind of continues to build the relationship, the trust factor. So again, as I said, trust is critical, and especially you are dealing with people's money. So please be cognizant about it. Uh, yeah, I think that is some of the thoughts that I had, some of the skills I have applied and continue to apply while I build products for my customers. So Ankita, I think I'm done and I'm open for questions.
Sure, Malti. Thank you. So let's just begin with the Q&A. So first question is by Preeti. He's asking, with Amazon and Apple entering fintech, how is the journey of new fintechs launched in 2015 expected to be? I think she wanted to write 2019. I'm not so sure.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because typically the Amazon Pay and the Google Pay, it has all been there in the last 2 to 3 years, right?
Yeah.
2 years, in fact. Yeah. So as I said, there is a lot of appetite and there is a lot of opportunity that we have, and innovation is happening. Definitely, since these are bigger player, they have a huge customer footprint. So probably and there is already, as I said, a level of trust that has been established with the customer. So they have definitely a advantage, an upper hand over there to be able to lure customers. But at the same time, we cannot forget stories of, let's say, other payment apps like Paytm, who have gone big. Of course, Paytm had a edge again that they were early adopters in this space. But I think there is still space while there is a good amount of crowding that is happening. But I would say that uh, figure out if there are, for the new fintech who are looking to enter that space, I think there is already a good amount of competition that we have. We need to probably explore services that could complement what we already have. Yep.
All right. All right. The next question is want to know if these surveys picked are specific to India or global.
Which
And
services are we talking about?
surveys, I think Divya is referring to one of the few of the slides which you have presented. Want to
Mm-hmm.
know if these surveys picked are specific to India or global.
No, these are global, and as I said, these are across. For example, some of the examples which I took from a personal finance app was from Mint. Some of the tax examples that I took are from TurboTax. Zoho is another financial accounting. So these are all global products.
All right. The next question is, does partnership also include usage of third-party tools? If yes, wouldn't it be better to use in-house tools available to have a better ROI?
Okay, that's a very tricky question, and I'm sure all the product managers here would be smiling. So, see, whenever you talk about a third-party tool, it is the question over here, and the parameters that you're looking for an ROI is that what is the time to market that you're looking at? If you have time and if there are not competition over there, if you want to be an early adopter, then you probably want to build it in-house. Definitely, you have more control, you have tighter integration, you have more control on the behavior of it. But if there are established players and it is just an opportunity that you see over there by partnership, then I would say just go for it. And it depends on, as I said, a lot of things. That are your strategies aligned? What is the kind of value proposition, complementary value propositions that you are bringing onto the table? So any kind of partnerships is kind of driven a lot by, of course, there is a revenue aspect that we talk over there, but it is also driven by the strategic alignment and how are both the partners benefiting each other. So it's not a there is no prescriptive thing over there. It is very contextual, case to case basis.
All right. Next question is, what do you feel about the lack of product development skill in India?
uh, I would say, see, if you look at uh, the way the IT industry has evolved in India in the last 25 years, we have kind of gone up the value chain, right? We used to be a purely low cost services organizations in India, starting from Infosys and Wipro. And in the last decade, I would say we have definitely gone up the value chain. There are so many product companies which have started to put in their development centers over here. Uh, some of the reports which we read is that which says that okay, there are still about 80% of the engineering students who are hired are not employable. So I definitely see that there is a gap, but again, I would say this is something, an evolving phase. The way we have evolved in the last 25 years, I would say we would continue to do that. The situation, the number of people who have gone to startups, the number of original thinking ideas that we are getting, I think is fantastic. So I think that way we are at a great time to be here. But I would say that space is evolving and we are definitely getting better.
All right. Next question is, what is the scope of cloud platform in these fintechs in India and other geographies like US, EU, APAC?
All right. So, I mean, cloud is one of the, probably I did not talk enough about it, and that's my bad. So, while we talk about data sciences, blockchains, and wallets, and a lot of other things, cloud platform is definitely one of the evolving things. So today, if I look at bigger banks, all of them have huge data centers and a lot of legacy and systems. And they all are looking that how do I kind of move into something which is more lightweight, where my infrastructure can be more scalable. That is from a banking, the bigger players perspective. I think the cloud platform and to be able to chalk out a VM in no time has been a big boom and an enabler for these fintech startups. So it is just to kind of summarize the answer. Cloud platform is definitely a big accelerator for the fintech products.
All right. Can the best practices be patented in India?
The patent space is, I think, the way I look at Germany or the US, the Western countries, their patent overall, whether you talk about the laws or the mechanisms are very well oiled, whereas in India, it is still evolving. I think majority of the patents filed by Indians are still approved more in the Western countries. In India, it is kind of just taking shape with more and more local players coming into the field. So it is still evolving. But yes, I mean, of course, the process is there and it can be patented.
All right. How are players expected to manage the ethics and privacy issues which has impacted their ability to scan the SMEs and make credit decisions?
So, I mean, again, this is an area because earlier, there would be looking at some very specific things. Like I would say, okay, I would look at your balance sheet. I would have the owner's credibility and blah blah stuff, which were very strict. But again, in this space also, the I don't know if I can you repeat the question? I think I kind of got a little lost with my own thoughts.
Yeah. How are players expected to manage the ethics and privacy issues which has impacted their ability to scan the SMEs and make credit decisions?
Okay. All right. I think I kind of went into the a little other direction. See, to be in the long run, it is very, very important to be integrate, to have integrity as one of the top priorities. So while it is great that you have more and more SMBs coming onto your board, you're giving more lending. I think no matter how fast you want to evolve, the integrity aspect and the watch out that you are boosting the right set of SMBs is very important. Otherwise, the amount of because the kind of measures that are being put in place to detect such frauds, to detect such kind of events is definitely becoming more stringent. So if you want to be in the game for long, integrity has to be the ethic part of it has to be very, very in the DNA.
All right. What is the starting point for a person with no fintech knowledge but is in a product management role?
I would say, okay, that's a good one. um, I would say somebody who has been into product management. So I can probably take my own example because I came primarily from ERP space, doing some amount of fintech, financial and accounting. But there is always a steep learning curve that you have, assuming that your product management skills are well in place, you have built products. I think the only thing that you need to gain here is understanding the market segment, understanding the domain knowledge. So there is definitely a lot of effort. There is a steep learning curve over there, but everything is time bound. And over a period of 3 to 6 months, I definitely see there is no reason why you cannot also be proficient in the domain as much as is required by the product, as much as required by your job. So there is definitely a steep learning curve, but here you will have to lean on to your mentors. You will have to lean on to your teams, to your experts, your specialists, your compliance team, to make you aware that what are the things that you need to look out for. Obviously, you cannot be suddenly become a domain expert in 6 months' time, but then what are the things that you need to watch out for? What are the things that you need to be aware of it? There is definitely a good amount of self motivation that is needed from the person to put in those efforts and to get acquainted with the space.
All right. Do you have any advice for small resource staff fintechs that are interested in getting access to the regulatory sandboxes of RBI or SEBI?
So as far as so I have a lot of secondary connect on this because not really been part of core some of those startups things. But what I understand, again, this is from some of the secondary knowledge, as I said, is that everything will not be rosy on day one. Things are evolving, especially when I heard of some of the talks around the India stack, the UPI APIs which are available. What is the kind of data? So I think all of us are learning. These sandboxes are a great way. These APIs which we are trying to leverage on are a great place for us to start into getting into a more connected world. But please watch out for uh, and keep reporting that, how do you kind of use that data. But the space is still evolving and there is still a long way to go.
All right. There is a conflict about having the customer data server to be established only within the country, India. Since this
Correct.
is high sensitive data, how do you think giants like Amazon, Google, and other approach this issue?
So yeah, this is definitely, and especially with the GDPR and some of these data governance, we definitely cannot get the data out of the country. So there are those typical, depending upon, I mean, within the data itself, there are a lot of classification that you can do. What is the C1 data, C2 data, C3 data. So depending upon not so critical data, there is a part of it which can be pushed on to other countries wherever you have your development centers to be able to do good testing. Whenever you're talking about C1 data, definitely it is very, very sensitive, and there are certain companies who have those dedicated VPN lines and all that to be able to do the testing, to be able to build products or do the analysis of the data that we are talking about. Uh, but the ultimate, if the data cannot be moved out or can be viewed by anybody outside the country, then that part has to be remained within the country. The resources available there have to deal with it. So whether I'm talking about banks or I'm talking about any of these giants, they need to have those practices and processes put in place to make sure that they kind of align with uh, those guidelines.
All right. Maybe this we might take it as a last question, looking at the time, Malti. So the last question is
Sure.
ML and AI overhyped as there are too many institutes, trainings, however, very few stories had been heard about its real usage?
I would not say that, but probably if you would have asked me this about a year and a half back, where I myself was not so much plugged into it. But the way I see is that, I mean, nobody is defying the fact that data is the new gold. I know that we can get blindfolded a little bit here and there with the amount of data that we talk about. Um, while there are some of those, online institutes and all which talk about AIML, I definitely cannot comment on what is the quality of the education imparted at these institutes. That is definitely something I can comment upon. But what in terms of these skill sets, I definitely see that there is a huge amount of opportunities out there for us to define how this data and how these algorithms or how these data products, so-called data products, can help us solve many of the use cases. So I would say we are still in a discovery mode over there, where we are trying to, develop some independent algorithms where we have use cases with us, and we are trying to do a matchmaking and see that, okay, will this solve this or not? So it's more on an exploratory mode and a discovery mode right now. But I definitely see that it might be overhyped at places, but there is definitely a lot of value that these technologies bring in.
All right. Before we end the session, I would just want everyone to know that the next webinar is from the GTM series by Dr. G. Sridhar, who is a professor of marketing from IIM Kozhikode, and the topic will be more flow, less force, how flow can help you win at a workplace. I'll just repeat: more flow, less force, how flow can help you win at the workplace on 21st of June. For more information, please visit nasscom.in/events. And thank you, Malti, for your time and efforts and that enriching presentation. I'm sure everyone will walk away with something new that they have learned, and amazing insights and wonderful webinar, Malti. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you. See you all of you soon. Thank you.